back of the rim. Garnett on the slam and foul. Here's a Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
If you've been paying attention to the 2025 NBA season, well, you know we're about to enter an unexpected NBA Finals, as in, at one point or another, these really weren't the matchups people were talking about. Maybe at the beginning of the season, yeah, you could have sold someone on New York OKC. Midway through, it was a long shot. And an even longer one was OKC Indiana. Yeah. The Pacers being in this position and having actually capitalized on their play, which has been consistent pretty much since the 2025 calendar began, it's an amazing feat. And it's kinda in line with how the finals matchups of the 2020s have kept us on our toes a bit. So today I wanted to take a step back and talk about some of the finals that have happened that you would all be familiar with where they really weren't expected. And with today's sponsor, you can expect the unexpected. Chance is the #1 free-to-play social casino in America. Using the games, you can win cash prizes that can be redeemed instantly to your bank account within seconds. They have custom games you can only find on Chance, plus over 1,000 premium slot games, including all the best slots you're used to. They are not your traditional online casino. It's the future. It's a social casino, so it's safe across the United States, even states where all other types of casinos aren't. It doesn't run on crypto, and you do not need a VPN to play. You can use cards or bank payments to fund your account in US dollars. The biggest banks in the world support Chance, including Chase, Bank of America, Citibank, and Goldman Sachs. The cash prizes can be instantly transferred to your bank. There's no 3 to 5 day waiting period. It's your money, you can take it out. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up, less than 30 seconds to verify your identity, and you can start playing and winning right away. Any members that sign up through my link get 5 sweep coins and 50,000 gold coins free. You can find the link in the comment section and description. Oh boy, Heat Nuggets. This is a hilarious NBA Finals for the fact of how it happened and how I've never seen anything about it since. Seriously, the only time I see footage from this NBA Finals is when I'm editing videos like this, when it needs a mention. So yeah, needless to say, this was almost completely unexpected. While Miami had been just one shot away from the 2022 Finals, they came into 23 flat. They had all the usual problems this team had throughout the Jimmy era, and by the time the playoffs came around, they were merely an 8th seed. Matter of fact, they had to play into it. So yeah, after yet another mid-season following their 2020 NBA Finals trip and failing to acquire multiple stars and or support pieces, there was no expected NBA Finals trip here. Yet Giannis immediately fell, it changed that series. Although I will say they still did impressive things to pull it out. They handled New York, then went up 3-0 on the Boston Celtics, nearly becoming the first NBA team to blow such a lead. So instead of at that point what was assumed to be a Celtics-Nuggets Finals, we got the Heat Nuggets. Now, Denver making it was really no surprise. The conference kind of opened up a bit, but they were also getting Jamal Murray back and had been expected to be contenders whenever they were going to have everyone present, and they were. Still, this apparently wasn't enough coming into 2023 and throughout the season to convince people they were going to do it. No, the expected 2023 NBA Finals was actually Bucks Suns, which feels like something predicted at the beginning of the season, which still feels weird given how Phoenix's year ended. Of course, they went on to trade for Kevin Durant. They had no time to get that together. They really didn't get close. A Bucks Suns rematch actually would have been nice given 2021 is very underrated. But yes, in the end, we were forced to deal with Miami and Denver, which was the most oralist, uninteresting finals we've had in some time. Just being objective, seriously. NBA messed up branding a long time ago, but then to get two teams who had virtually no history and no expectation to meet, and throw on top of this all, it was a lopsided matchup. Denver had the star power Miami didn't. They were clearly a much better team. Yeah, this finals was unexpected and now very forgettable. So let's go ahead and talk about Bucks Suns, because that came almost as left field if you were counting from the beginning of the playoffs as Heat Nuggets did. If you'll recall, shortly after that season, there was a graphic releasing asking if we should just fast forward to the 2022 NBA Finals, because the state the Lakers and Nets rosters were in 2021 had already made it feel as if they were on some type of collision course at some point. LeBron hadn't sustained an injury yet. They looked poised to be able to at least get close to repeating. Then the Nets, finally healthy, immediately formed a big three. It felt fairly obvious if they actually shared time on the court together, there wasn't a lot teams in that time were going to be able to do. Injuries wrecked them both, and the Nets still had a puncher's chance. But yeah, perhaps unsurprisingly, you have Brooklyn losing to Milwaukee and LA losing to Phoenix. both massively hindered by injuries. And as far as those two teams go, well, yeah, it was a bit overdue for the Bucks. We'd started looking at them around 2019 to seriously get there. By 2021, it was beginning to feel a little bit late, especially given the upset at the hands of Miami a year earlier. So they just finally reached the end of their process, and Phoenix really supercharged there. So yes, the conference, like a lot of this decade, it opened up. No Kawhi for the Clippers, no Jamal Murray for Denver, and I say supercharged because Phoenix, again, in the bubble, was that storybook team. They were at the very beginning, they added Chris Paul, and they were in the NBA Finals a year later. This after not having seen a postseason since Steve Nash. It was a very weird time. Yet the resulting finals was amazing, and I always remind everyone of that. I think it suffered from timing and, well, being on this list of unexpected finals. It isn't something people were looking for. It's not a finals people were talking about the whole season. It really isn't what people wanted to see. We've had the casual audience conversation so far many a times, and we don't have to lie. Nets Lakers, that was on everyone's mind. KD Braun, Kyrie Braun, super teams, the whole works. So if you watch the 2021 playoffs, it should not be controversial to say Bucks Suns really probably had little chance of happening in a fully healthy world. We really haven't known a fully healthy world in the 2020s, literally. And this was a great consolation. I don't mind not seeing Heat Nuggets on my timeline, yet not seeing a lot of praise, a lot of retrospective on what Giannis did. It does bother me. He had multiple historical NBA Finals plays. The stat lines were flat out monstrous. The games were competitive. Phoenix was very much in position to win, and so much was on the line. It was the difference between Chris Paul finally getting a ring after such an unfortunate career and Giannis starting to build his legacy. It's definitely not helped how these teams have kind of crumbled since then. More unfortunate events, more injuries, questionable decisions in the front office, and it really just suffers from the same thing a lot of the recent NBA Finals do, where there just isn't a lot of history to these teams before they get there, and then after they get there, nobody's really checking for them. Nobody's checking for their matchups the next season. So yes, Milwaukee and Phoenix, definitely unexpected, but 100% worth a rewatch. Heat Mavs 2011 has become so ingrained in NBA lore, you wouldn't even know there were actually a couple of NBA Finals that were way more expected and way more realistic before this one. There were a lot of good teams, but the Celtics and Lakers had just got done with their second finals in 3 years, and the Heat put together a super team, so anybody else was just going to have to prove it. Also, with the way the regular season had gone, both Boston and Chicago were slated to be teams who could beat Miami. Then of course on the west side there was the whole legend of how Phil Jackson always won his titles in threes, Kobe was poised to tie Jordan, and finally we were going to get his finals matchup with LeBron. But yes, we know how the story goes. Miami peaked, Boston fell apart, and in the Miami and Chicago series, we got another reminder that the postseason is a different beast. Meanwhile, on the West, Dirk just flat out commenced what still probably remains the greatest playoff run of all time. And it's actually only gotten more incredible to me over the years, going back and looking how he was leading this Mavs team. There have been attempts to make them seem better than they were. Don't get me wrong, they were a good team, but boy, Dirk leading them with tough buckets, and what would today just be flat out considered impossible to be the leading style of a championship team. Yeah, we'll probably never see anything like it again. And unlike on the East side, there were a grand total of 0 injuries helping them here. They just walked LA down. They very clearly set out to show OKC they weren't ready, and thus we were granted one of the more random and amazing final series you'll ever see. And unlike a lot of finals of the 2020s, there was history here. D-Wade and Dirk had just gone at it a few years prior. The Mavs sold very hard. We've been through that. We could talk about calls, but they also just sold. And there was a bit of iciness between all of them. Dirk, Braun, Wade. Nothing super obvious on the court. It wasn't even Dirk's personality, but even years later, they acknowledged there was something there. All in all, that random finals ended up being extremely important. It became, as we found out, a necessary chapter in LeBron's legacy, his story, and it also capped off Dirk's. He really avoided a lot of heat with the first couple of years of his playoff career happening before social media really exploded. Getting here and finally showing he could actually lead a championship team in one of the most impressive ways possible, it just stamped his legacy right there. He didn't have to do anything else afterward, and he really kind of didn't. He just hooped for a while. I would say in a lot of ways, lead up to this finals, what actually happened, the fallout, there really hasn't been much like it since. 2009 Lakers Magic. Totally left field, and all these years later, still really disappointing that it happened. In the context of the time period, the Magic were really an upcoming team. Dwight was blossoming. They were not a team people had going to the finals that specific year. And like a lot of teams in history, they caught a break on the way. Boston not having Kevin Garnett quite obviously changed the whole bracket, changed all the expectations, and even then, the Celtics falling out just gave the NBA a green light to go full speed in promoting the Kobe and Bron finals. The puppet commercials, the two battling for a title of best player in the NBA, although Bron around this time had nodded that to Kobe. They were on a collision course. The NBA had its dream. Also, this was very pissed off Kobe. After being thrashed by Boston, he really changed his entire approach to how to lead the team, and they were over-prepared for Orlando. They were ready to rematch Boston, and if not then, they were ready to stamp out the Cleveland hype. So then the option dwindling down to a team who had not even seen the conference finals since the 90s. Yeah, look, it was an aesthetically pleasing finals. It was even, although it was a gentleman's sweep, the games were fun. This was also just not what anyone expected or wanted at the time. And it actually makes this next one crazier because Celtics Lakers in 2010, you would imagine, just popped right back up to the top of the list. Boston would come back healthy, the East hadn't changed much. The throne was theirs for the retaking, only if you start from the beginning of the season, yeah, you might have been sold on a Boston-LA rematch. Throughout the season, the Celtics did not really inspire confidence. And by the time the postseason was rolling around, yes, once again, the NBA was pushing Cavs, Lakers. And this is always the fun part. This part of LeBron's career has been relitigated so many times, it's almost not even known the Cavs were heavy favorites against Boston. Cleveland had won 61 games. Bron was MVP for the second consecutive season. The Shaquille O'Neal that's now a meme was actually seen as a really powerful addition relative to where Cleveland was, and then they traded for Antoine Jameson, which was also a huge deal at the time. Really, this was seen as LeBron's best chance at winning a title while he had been in Cleveland for the first 10. Meanwhile, Boston only came in at a record of 50-32, which earned them 4th seed. They looked old, they kept dealing with injuries, and people were actually considering this would already be the end of the Big Three era. Almost any quote-unquote expert you could find had Cleveland in about 5 or 6. Vegas odds went for Cavs, and the NBA once again had their marketing geared toward the next big thing. So yeah, then Boston came in and ran the table. Just like Miami and Chicago in 2011 showing the regular season is a sample rather than a predictor, the difference in these two teams showed. So yeah, while in spirit Celtics Lakers could be expected, you get to the midway point of the 2010 season and postseason, it had actually fallen into around 3rd place of expectations. By this time though, fandom would have been okay with either of these. Kobe versus Bron, Magic, Boston, it all had lore by that point. Celtics Lakers 2 commenced, and we were granted one of the greatest NBA finals of all time. To wrap this up, I am going with the most difficult argument in my opinion, and it's to show you the Warriors-Cavs 2015 actually was not the expected finals. Yeah, this is definitely fun to argue a decade later given everything that's happened in those 10 years. Especially given the Cavs had the LeBron return, they had the Big Three, and these teams were 1 and 2 seeds. However, yeah, despite the 2015 Hawks, whatever that was, I don't know how many people actually were fooled. The East, as usual, was kind of LeBron's to lose. In the West side though, bear with me, these 67-win Warriors with MVP Curry still had to prove it. Oh yeah, this is an era of the NBA, let me remind you, where the old adage of, hey, jump shot shooting teams can't win championships, it was still going strong. And we'd seen many examples of the regular season not really translating to postseason, so while the Warriors looked really good and still had expectations, the popular opinion at the time wanted to line them up against the Clippers and specifically San Antonio. San Antonio on the heels of defending their title. Yeah, you were having a really hard time convincing people this young jump shooting Warrior team was going to defeat the Spurs. Dethrone them actually. Also, mentally revisit, if you can, their series against Memphis when they were down 2-1. There were a lot of questions about this Golden State team. What ended up happening is they didn't have to play the Clippers or the Spurs, which was one of the things that was added on to their 2016 expectations after beating the injured Cavs. Yeah, the expected finals for 2015 was another LeBron and Spurs rematch. You'll even remember the hype surrounding that game where Kyrie just cooked San Antonio. Warriors-Cavs was on the table. Warriors-Cavs was not guaranteed, but it also wasn't totally unexpected in left field. It's just a fun one to revisit because seeing as how that kicked off the Golden Dynasty and the Warriors-Cavs rivalry, you wouldn't know this was the finals people had on the table but weren't totally convinced of. Also, very important context, you gotta remember the Warriors came out of absolutely nowhere. In a now very eerie bit of foreshadowing, in around August of 2014, Steph had actually said he was a better offensive player than LeBron. Now, mind you what LeBron he was talking about, and mind you what we thought and knew about Steph Curry at the time. This was also kind of the same vibe of maybe a year or so earlier where Mark Jackson called he and Klay the greatest shooting backcourt of all time. Yeah, they hadn't earned any stripes for a lot of the things that had been said, and people really didn't take them seriously, or take the comments seriously. They'd shown flashes against LA, San Antonio. They hadn't beaten either of them though. In accordance, coming into that year, Vegas gave them plus 2,800 to plus 3,000 odds to win the title, and that landed behind teams like Spurs, Cavs, Chicago, Clippers, OKC, and even the Houston Rockets in some instances. The ESPN forecast had them as a 50-55 win team, probably out in the second round. So I guess the way to argue this one is it was coming into the season. If you had told somebody the Cavs and Warriors would be the finals, you'd have gotten laughed at. There was a lot of people in line in front of Golden State, and they passed them all in 1 year, which is definitely why the hate was the way it was around that time, if you remember. So in short, a lot of the NBA Finals in NBA history haven't really been left field, yet there have been twists. It seems we almost never get the super matchups we expect, but now here in the 2020s it just feels different. We're not just getting finals where one or two things had to happen, we're getting teams you would have never thought would have played each other, and then in the next years, the games never really turn into rivalries. It's way more one and done, and I am interested to see how the NBA audience accepts this over time. We did a lot of complaining in the 2010s about parity, super teams, and as we talked about in the last video, we're now about to name our 7th different champion in 7 years. And not only that, don't look now, but we haven't had a rematch finals since Warriors Cavs. I feel like that's flown under the radar. Not only have we not had a rematch, you don't even get them like the Celtics Lakers where it's every other year or maybe a little bit down the line. These guys squabble and go about their business. Which style do you like more? Do you prefer to see high-level teams constantly squaring off throughout a time period? Or does the potential of a small market finals get you excited? Let me know in the comment section. Also be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications every time a new video drops. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.